think it's been about 22 years since Bill Clinton said that we really needed an honest conversation about race in this country, and we never seem to have it, because whenever we have that conversation, it's always one side wanting to get the other side to understand their point of view. It's really not a two-way conversation. I think there was a movie called Cool Hand Luke. You know, what we have here is a failure to communicate and just knock the guy on the ground. Another reality is that for the past, I'd say since the 1960s, I'd say 90 to 95% of African Americans have voted for the Democratic Party, whatever the candidate is. Even to the point, and by the way, I'm from Atlantic City, and one of my clients who actually is a friend, Craig Calloway, I don't know if any of you know about him, but he actually perfected a strategy, a brilliant election strategy based on the assumption that 95% of all African Americans vote Democrat. Because anyone who did old school politics, and I grew up in Atlantic City, so of course I was saturated with it, knows that if you want to have an election, what you do is you go around, you knock on all the doors, and pretend you're campaigning. But you're not really campaigning, you're really canvassing. You make your pitch, but what you really do at the end of every pitch is you shake the person's hand, look into the eye, and say, can I count your vote in November? And of course, if they say they're going to vote for you, they'll say I'm going to vote for you. If they say something like, lots of luck, and start staring at the ceiling, then you know that person's not going to vote for you. So then you know that when come election day, you're just going to knock on the doors of the people who are going to vote for you. That was the classic thing. What Craig Calloway did is he said, he perfected what's called the knock and drag step strategy, where he said, if you know that 95% of the African Americans are going to vote Democrat, why even bother with the candidate? Just knock on the door and bring them to the polls. And that's all you have to do. And he was so successful doing that in Atlantic City, he actually got invited to Tampa, Florida for the Democratic National Convention. He became a truly national figure with that strategy. So here I am as a Republican candidate asking a group that is, if all things are equal, is going to vote 95% against me, and I'm asking for your vote. So I know it's a tough sell. So let me talk about some things. Normally, 95% of the group never vote for anybody under normal circumstances. When you think about, when's the last time you heard of a vote where 95% of the people voted for one guy? You think of stuff like Iraq, where 95% of the people vote for Saddam Hussein, or 95%, because every community has people of all different interests. You have rich, poor, educated, uneducated, farmers. So usually when you have a diverse group of people, you have diverse group of interests politically. And so usually when you have 95% of a group going in a certain way, something's wrong. And it's either fear that's driving it, or it's corruption that's driving it, but something that's driving it. It's totally unnatural, in my opinion. Because every other group, in fact, in politics, I'm in the worst situation. Because when it comes to Jews are less likely than any other ethnic group in America to vote for someone just because they're Jewish. So I'm in a handicap. So what is in the interest of the black communities? And it's a fascinating story, again, coming from Atlantic City. Because historically, African Americans voted Republican, voted for the party of Abraham Lincoln. Historically, the whole Ku Klux Klan was revived in 1915 with this movie called Birth of a Nation, where the whole purpose was to keep blacks from voting, because as blacks moved up from the South with the great migration to get away from the Jim Crow of the South, they were voting Republican, and that really disturbed the Democratic political establishment of the big cities. And so to suppress the vote, all those riots started, and the lynchings and everything else started in the North for the purpose of keeping blacks from voting Republican. And that was the voting pattern until the 1930s. And then in the 1930s, of course, with Franklin Roosevelt, the Depression, all these government programs gradually brought the black community to the Democratic Party, except in Atlantic City, by the way. When I was growing up, most African Americans continued to vote Republican, and I still remember as a kid, the name of the club was called the Stan Patters Club, because the whole country shifted black leadership to Democrats, but not Atlantic City. So what is in the interest? What's going on right now? I have and I grew up in Atlantic City, and I grew up in a world that I thought was a wonderful world, because it was a totally integrated city. And I mean integrated. When I was in 7th grade, went to the Central Junior High School, which was called the Central Junior High School, because everybody in town went there. And it was an interesting experience because it was the first time that I'm in a close environment with people of other races. And I have to say we had remarkable teachers back then, both black and white. And one of the things I did, we had this old Italian guy called Philip Sabrola. And what he did, because to get us all feeling equal, he would have us do games. He'd have us, I remember the song was called Hey Lolly Lolly Lo. And everybody would have to instantly get called on to think of different lyrics that would rhyme in a hurry. And I remember as a guy who I thought was a smart kid who knew everything, and I'd always be like last in figuring it out. Of course, others of black kids just were quicker at it. That's where I learned that it wasn't anything racial, that we're all sort of the same. And we forged friendships, and the teachers, some of the most inspiring teachers were blacks, because in those days, the teachers' colleges, I guess, if you were bright and were black, you went to a teachers' college. And so the finest teachers in the public school system were black. I went on to Duke University, which was an elite school in North Carolina, and I found out that my Atlantic City public school education put me at an equal basis with some of the kids from the best prep schools around the country. And then when I got out, I went into service, had a low draft lottery number. I didn't have any political influence. So just for the heck of it, I decided I'd go into the National Guard unit, where I figured I didn't have a chance because there was a long waiting list. But of course, I didn't realize that Atlantic City's unit used to be a colored unit. So I was one of the 15 white guys in the unit. And I was taken right away. And I really learned a lot. So that's my background. So one of the things I learned when now I'm being called a, quote, racist or a bigot, because I made some remarks about affirmative action, it's because my entire life I never saw a need for affirmative action. Because all of the African Americans I knew growing up succeeded if they worked hard, got married, learned a skill, the same as anybody else. So I didn't really see a need for special treatment to get ahead. And that's when I left Atlantic City in the 1960s. And of course, we all know in the 1960s, everything changed. The Democratic Party took control. We had Lyndon Johnson, we had the Great Society. We had all these special programs. And basically, for 50 years, the black community has been dominated by the Democratic Party, which in my opinion always assumed that blacks could not succeed in America unless there was special treatment, special programs that was not available to anybody else. And if you look at the 50 years of the Democratic approach to how we promote what's best for the black community, with the 50 years that came ahead of me, under the Republican idea that you have a level playing field. Everybody follows the same rules. If you succeed or if you fail, it's on you, not on somebody else. And it's not always having a chip on your shoulder. And by the way, was there discrimination in Atlantic City growing up? Yeah, I remember it. I remember working at the arcades. And I don't know if any of you remember going to the old Atlantic City arcades where you played skee ball and you got coupons, and if you got a certain amount of coupons, you got a prize, right? And they'd say, the prizes would say, you get 10 coupons, you get a prize. So everybody would play skee ball, they get their 10 coupons, they go get the prize, and then somebody would have to be there saying, oh, no, you don't get the prize. You just got 10 points. There's 10 points for every coupon. Now you got to play 10 times more to get the coupons, and people get angry. And I remember being called the dirty Jew, hook-nosed Jew, this Jew. I'm just a 15-year-old kid, working for minimum wage. So I know what it's like to have discrimination. But I also know from personal experience that you will bump into ignorant people wherever you go. And the cure for ignorance isn't to blame everybody for the ignorance of a handful. And so I took the insults, I saved my money, I went on, and I made friends with everybody else. And I saw in the black community others who had the same experience. The ones that just let it be forgotten and did their job succeeded. I found that if someone's going to use an excuse to have a chip on their shoulder, there's not going to be success. I remember when I was in my 20s, I went to Ireland. And Ireland at the time was a pretty miserable place. And it was a miserable place because everybody was always talking about who had done wrong to their family 200 years ago. Carrying all these grudges. And you found out there were two classes of people in Ireland. People who were just miserable, angry, blaming family members. In other words, the whole idea was when you got to reach a certain age, they wait for someone to die so they get an inheritance. And then fight over the inheritance. That was the mentality of Ireland. And then you had the other Irish who said, to heck with that. They left the country and came to America. And so we Americans had this idea that yes, there's discrimination. Yes, you overcome things. But yes, you work hard, save hard, and have a better life for your children and your grandchildren. That's the way it was with my grandfather. My grandfather wanted to be a dentist. And he went to dental school, or rather, he wanted to be an engineer. Went to engineering school. And when he got out of engineering school, could not become an engineer because they were not hiring Jews in the engineering school, in the big engineering companies. So he went to school again to become a dentist. He became a dentist. And he invented things. Because the idea was he could not get what he wanted for himself. But he was determined to get what he wanted for his children. That was the mentality. I think we are losing that too often we say, I want everything now. And to succeed in America, you can succeed in America, but it takes discipline, it takes work, it takes disappointment. But you can succeed here, as opposed to any other country in the world where you could not. You see a lot of names, shoemaker, tailor, farmer. Why did people have these names? Because in the old country, if your father was a tailor, you were a tailor. And your grandchildren, you couldn't move anywhere. You were stuck where you were. But America opened up all these opportunities. So here I am saying, when I saw what was left of the discrimination in the 1960s, I would have thought we would have fixed all these problems by now. But instead, I can honestly say things are worse now than I ever remember them being. I remember in any neighborhood of Atlantic City, they say, did you lock your doors at night? Hell, we never closed our doors at night. Because it was too hot to close your door at night, right? You had a little flimsy screen door. Did you work? No. Everybody that I knew, now I'm not saying everything was perfect everywhere, but in my city where I grew up, anyone could walk anywhere they wanted to. You had bustling nightclubs. Of course, the best ones were the north side, the black neighborhood, the Club Harlem. Reggie Edgehill, the greatest host on the Jersey coast. I don't know if any old-timers remember that stuff. But that's the kind of world we have. And so when someone like me says, I want to make America great again, that's the kind of America that I grew up in, that I'm talking about. Where, I remember they said a guideline, if you buy a house, never buy a house if you have to spend more than 25% of your income for the house, right? Never buy an apartment if it's more than 25%. Now it's lucky if it's 60%. Housing is no longer affordable. Healthcare, used to be everyone could afford healthcare because you had major medical insurance. If you had a sore throat or a splinter, you didn't go to the doctor, or you didn't expect someone else to pay, you paid the doctor, and it was usually $1 or $2. Because you had the doctor who was doing the work, you didn't have to have 9 people filling out insurance forms. When I went to time to go to college, we didn't have student loans, right? Because you could earn $1,200 in a summer, anything. Washing dishes. I happened to wash dishes, I waited tables, I bussed tables, I drove a cab, and I was able to make enough money in a summer to pay for the room, board, tuition at college, and still have enough money left over for 7 beers for $1 which is what it was, right? So what I'm saying is, so that's the reality of the America I grew up with. And now I see my kids going to school. And my kids are going to school being taught that everything about the 1960s and 50s was racist and oppression. One thing, another example, if you go to any high school, one of the most popular plays the high school kids will do is Hairspray, about how there was segregation in the music business and this evil stuff. That's fiction. I grew up with Dick Clark's American Bandstand. That was the reality. But it seems like we're brainwashing Americans to think that America was a rotten, rigged system against any minority. And that's something I think is wrong, and it's something I want to change. And as long as I'm alive, I'm speaking what I believe to be the truth. Now, I know one thing, about when someone calls you a racist, it's starting to remind me of something else. I'm a lawyer, I like history, I like to read old trials. And one of the things that fascinates me is the witch trials of Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. You had 200 people were charged with witchcraft. Most of the people charged with witchcraft confessed. However, 19 people insisted it was all baloney, it was garbage, and they pled not guilty. Guess what happened? The 19 who denied being witches were the ones who were executed. Because the fact that they denied that they were witches was proof of how evil they were. Because they couldn't even admit that they were witches. So all the people who pled guilty to something they were not accused of went on to live. And the people who denied being a witch, they were the ones who were executed.
Mr. Grossman,
I've talked too long.
no, I just want to ask you a couple questions.
Okay, and so anyway, that's my presentation, because really the thing is, all politicians say everything, no matter what I say, you can take it as you want, but I'm saying I'm being painted as somebody I'm not. And I want you to understand that, and I know it's a difficult thing to do, but that's who I am. And any questions you'd like to ask, I'll be happy to answer.
Well, you haven't been painted by this group as of yet. But what I want to ask now, the majority of African Americans are not fond of our president. Maybe that excludes Mr. Darwin Cooper. But the majority, I think I can speak that and for it to be factual. If you were to get into Congress, do you think that you would go along with most of his views?
Well, first I got to answer that question. You don't know, you don't like Donald Trump because of what you see about Donald Trump on the TV.
Well, no. One thing I know about Donald Trump, and one thing that I agree with him with, fake news. That's the one thing that I agree with him with. Because a lot of things that you hear on the news is not always true. So that is one thing that I can say I agree with him with. But still yet, the majority of us do not particularly care about the president and things that he stands for.
All right. Well, let me tell you what I stand for and where he stands for. And because when you talk about general terms, because trust me, I was on city council in Atlantic City when Donald Trump was at the height of his casino. And yeah, he's a difficult person to get along with.
Very arrogant.
And he has his, what we call his dick.
Very arrogant.
Very arrogant. Every personal characteristic that you may not like, that's probably him. However, and you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the original word of, or probably the movie. Anyone? I'm so old that I can't. Don't know if everyone knows the movie, but they had this movie called The Magnificent Seven.
Yes.
And the theme of the movie is you have these bandits, they're terrorizing a town, they're raping and pillaging, and nobody's coming forward to do something. So you get these washed up gunslingers, these miserable, rotten human beings, but yet, in a time of need, those miserable, rotten human beings. You know what a better example is? Oskar Schindler. Oskar Schindler in Germany. He was crooked, he was a womanizer, he was a cheat, he was a liar, but yet when the Jews were being rounded up and murdered, he was the only person who stood forward. So that what I'm really saying is sometimes in life, good people do very bad things, and bad people do very good things. And what I'm saying right now is Donald Trump, for whatever and I'm not going to defend his personal lifestyle or even his character, but at this moment in time, when no one else was stepping forward, he stepped forward to say, we've got to do three things. We've got to make it possible for our factories and businesses to grow again. That means tariffs to keep out the crap from China. It means fair trade deals. It means lowering the corporate taxes. And I know no one likes corporations, but by lowering it from 35% to 20%, they're hiring it. And we all know it, they're hiring it, because look at what you see in the restaurants. I go down the street, hiring, need job. So he's making the economy go again, and the immigration. The biggest thing that is driving down wages for everybody, including African Americans, is the fact that we are not enforcing our borders, and we're being flooded with cheap and compliant labor that's hurting everybody. So Donald Trump, as miserable as many people can see him, and I'm not going to say anything, but he has built up the industry again, fair deals with unfair competition, he's enforcing our immigration laws, and he's standing up to Islamic terrorism, which no one else was willing to do.
Ned, you had a question?
Yes, sir. What are your three priority policy issues for your campaign?
Well, the first one is, as I made it clear, is that I think Donald Trump has brought good to America, regardless of his personality. So I am dead set against this business of resistance or obstruction, or look for any technicality we can to drive him out of office. So if I'm in Congress, I will not vote to impeach him. In fact, I will try to help him implement the policies of building up our industry, stopping unfair competition, enforcing immigration laws, and I forgot what the other one. Oh, and on the Second Amendment, that we've got to protect the rights of individual Americans to defend themselves and not always rely on 911. The biggest gun-free zone we have is in Chicago, I believe, and it's not doing very well.
We're going to take two more questions. You got one, who else? All
You
right, go ahead, baby.
already gave us one thing, I want to hear the other two.
So, what, with the three things?
Yeah.
No, protect President Trump, enforce immigration laws,
It's not a policy.
and fight Islamic terror.
All right, baby, go ahead.
And support the Second Amendment. I said four things.
How does that help the second district?
Well, I mean, you already see it. Because when the economy is good, and when people...
Protecting Trump helps the economy here?
all I can say is, in spite of the miserable economy that my opponent, Democrat Jeff Van Drew and Phil Murphy, are giving... remember, this is Millville. When I used to work as a young lawyer for Millville, there were factories here. There was Wheaton Industry.
So you're bringing all those factories
So what
back.
I'm saying is the Democrats have driven industry out of New Jersey, and now the economy is so good that people in New Jersey are actually making money again because the tide is rising up, and even miserable New Jersey's boat is going up. So yeah, I'm running for a national office. I'm not running for ward leader. I'm not running to fix a pothole here. I'm running to make things better for the entire nation. And if the entire nation is succeeding, New Jersey will be better off.
All right, Malvin.
Yes, Ms. Grossman, you stated and you shared your experience on discrimination and how you were treated growing up. What is your position and how will you help the African American community? You feel as though you've been painted in such a way that, that has discredited you. So what is your position? How will you help us?
Yeah. Well, the best way, and I know I get in trouble here, but the best way to help the African American community is to treat everybody equally and giving everybody.
We looking for that. Oh, we looking for that. Now, let me tell you something. Now, you done got some brownie points in here. We've been wanting to be treated equally for a long time.
And
Black men drugged out of cars. Yeah, we've been wanting that, Mr. Grossman, so I agree with you on that.
yeah, and then then we go to that issue is, how what's the best way to overcome those stereotypes? And the best way to overcome those stereotypes, I think, and I'll give you one example. Whenever in the Jewish community, when someone who's Jewish commits a crime or does something awful, the whole community is embarrassed, and we say we don't want anything to do with them. When you have a Jewish murder, we won't even bury him in a Jewish cemetery. So what I think the first step is, if there are young men committing crimes and who are giving everyone else a bad name, I think that's not my job. I think the best way to handle that is for the community to disown those people and say, treat everybody with respect. Because when I was on the radio program with us or them, most of the police incidents that happen with fatal shootings happen when there's trouble and somebody calls the police. And the police come into a situation and then there's a problem. Most of the situations. So what's the alternative? Do we want to say, okay, let's not have police and just have it, someone feels threatened, they pull out a gun in their house, and the police are coming in to try to help the situation. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to really have this conversation to understand. Because right now we're saying, oh, the police do this, the police do that. From the point of view of the police officer, you're out there and you have people you don't know, and in one particular year, 2014, when I actually made comments that I'm now being criticized for, 126 police officers were murdered in 2014. So when you have a gun and you see someone make a sharp movement, you see something, do something, you know that if you don't make the right decision in 5 seconds, you're dead. And your kids are going to be orphans and your wife's going to be a widow. So I think what the first step we have to do is, again, have this conversation to understand each other, because what I find out is when, as a lawyer, I see this all the time. When two parties want to reach an agreement, they can always figure out a way to do it. On the other hand, when two parties don't want to reach an agreement, they can always find an excuse to blame something on the other side. And I think too often you have to ask, if blacks and whites in this country are constantly fighting with each other and mistrusting each other, ask yourself, who benefits from that? Who benefits from that? And there are people who benefit from that, and you know what I'm talking about. But if we would all work together in my community, it doesn't benefit me to see other people in my community poor, miserable, and victims. So we've got to find a solution, and I think that after 50 years of Democrats saying it's all the same thing, more money, every time there's a problem, more money, more programs, more this, more that, and the more we do, the government does, the worse it gets. I'm saying we have to have a reset. And by the way, there's actually, if you go on your Twitter, #walkaway. I'm asking you to go to #walkaway and walk away from a system and a way of thinking that has failed for the past 50 years.
All right, yes, sir. That's
May
it.
I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, Mr. Grossman, last week you mentioned in your talk today, last week you wrote an op-ed in the Star Ledger, why am I called it bigot? My question is to address why, in particular, I think you're a bigot, but also to give you an opportunity to get out from under that label.
Yeah.
So I think you're a bigot because of your denialism. You published a video in December of 2017, when New Jersey, like most of America, was great. In your preface to the video, you wrote, like Holocaust survivors, we're determined to tell our stories and speak the truth as much as we can. However, the history that you describe in that video is a fantasy. It never existed.
But
In describing...
it's not a question. You're saying something that's totally wrong.
I'm building to my question.
Yeah.
This is okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
sure.
right. In describing the New Jersey of your youth, you state there was no KKK or Jim Crow in New Jersey in most of America. This is a lie. This lie, I think, is no mere oversight attributable perhaps to ignorance. Rather, your lie is a profound denial of facts that continue to affect thousands of New Jerseyans, people in this room. To deny this history is to deny the dignity of all those who endured it. So some facts I'm going to move quickly through. In 1980, David Duke, or 1979, David Duke announced his 1980 candidacy in Barnegat, New Jersey. The German-American Buns had a camp in Sussex County called Camp Andover, where the KKK held rallies. This resort was called Camp Nordlands. Fritz Kuhn was selected by Hitler to run this outfit, and they worked closely with the KKK. At the time you were growing up in Atlantic City, my father was growing up on Big Oak Road in Bridgeton. My father, Fred, his sister Alvin, their mother and father, Bertrand and Walter Goldschmidt, came to South Jersey to raise chickens. They're German refugees, and they arrived in New York in 1938, fled their home in Hanover, Germany to escape Nazis.
Is this a question or?
Hold
You know what, let me say something for the record.
I'm
No, it's okay,
I'll sit down and.
Yeah, okay,
Get up
yeah.
and speak.
But I don't want you all to think, I've never met you before.
No, I'm
But
sorry.
no, it's okay,
Oh,
because this is an open forum.
thank you.
But I don't want them to think that I planted you here.
No.
You follow what I'm saying? I've never seen you before, and you have a right to ask, so yeah, Mr. Grossman, you sit down, but I'm gonna give you 2 more minutes to finish what you said, because I don't want you to insult him, but if you have some facts,
I'm
then they
not
can
trying to
start.
insult you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you an opportunity to get out from under this. So in memoirs by this guy, David Burgess, he described my hometown at the time my family arrived here. He described it as Bridgeton, the seat of the Confederacy in South Jersey, in part because of what he observed of the KKK in this area. And this is just a sample, but it's a sample that reflects my perspective on this history. So this is an opportunity, I think, to move away from bigotry, Mr. Grossman. I would ask you to please acknowledge that the KKK did exist in New Jersey, that this history is real, and that the story that you're putting about your childhood is fraudulent. Will you please do that?
No, your history is fake, and you've been brainwashing with every movie, every Hollywood movie, every media thing, the crap they're teaching in the schools, and I know it because I had to teach at the college. It's a false thing. Yes, the racism of the KKK, remember, the KKK was dead after the Civil War.
They marched
Republican.
here, they marched
After
here.
the movement.
Let me tell you.
They marched right,
Let- let-
they
It was a
marched here,
movement.
they'll finish.
I said it was dead after Republican President Grant killed it. And as I pointed out, historically, it's a historic fact, and you could go to the African American Museum in Atlantic City. Ralph Hunter did a wonderful job of that. The racism was revived by Democrats because they didn't like blacks voting Republican. And there was probably the most horrible racist movie ever created. In fact, this movie was so effective that the Nazi, Joseph Goebbels, actually watched that movie demonizing blacks called Birth of a Nation, and he made a movie just like it to demonize Jews in 1940 called The Jew Seuss. But anyway, that one Hollywood movie, the first 3-hour blockbuster movie, revived the KKK overnight in 1950, and that was the arm of the Democratic Party to keep blacks from voting Republican. And fortunately, Atlantic City, was a Republican town, and anyone who saw Boardwalk Empire, that HBO series, a lot of truth in it. Chalky White was a real character. I know that for a fact because I talked to the children and grandchildren of the people of that era. Sarah Spencer Washington, the African-American millionaire who created the Apex Beauty Parlor, who built a golf course for blacks when there was discrimination, all that stuff. But the bottom line is, as long as Republicans were in control, the KKK, yeah, they burned a cross in Egg Harbor Township because they were scared to set foot anywhere near Atlantic City. And yeah, they went out to Bridgeton, but they never had any real following in New Jersey. And again, I didn't say Americans are perfect. I said America created a better society than anyone else. And as I pointed out, I know the crap that's taught in the movies. I know the crap that's taught in school. I know the crap that the media saturates you with. And I am saying I lived through that period, and that was a great country. It was a great high school. It was a great neighborhood, a great city. And I think that everybody was better off then than we are now. Were we perfect? No. But I think we were better off, and I ask everybody, talk to parents and grandparents, I guarantee you, nobody here had to sit in the back of the bus, of a public service bus in New Jersey, right?
No.
There was no Jim Crow, there was no separate
No.
water fountains in New Jersey.
No,
No, there
I went
weren't.
to an all-segregated school in Quinton Township in 1947.
And if I had
And
no
I had to
Newport,
ride
I
a
would've gone to
bus,
school
I
in
had to ride a
segregated
separate
schools in
bus
the
from my
60s.
neighbors, and don't even talk about that.
Well, I will talk about the.
Well, don't, make
I-
that
will-
statement, don't make it try.
Well, the statement is, I wasn't around, I'm not as old as,
Well, I'm
and you were-
70
I was
I'm
born-
75.
I was born in 1949. So what I will tell you this,
I went to
is
all
that,
segregated schools.
is that when my parents, what they call the greatest generation, my dad and the neighborhoods, they fought World War II, they saw the racism, they saw the Nazis overseas, they came back, and whenever my father and his friends, remember, they grew up in New York City, Atlantic City, they never knew about what was going on outside. But when they went to these military bases and they saw the Jim Crow, as soon as the war was over, they got home in 1946, 1947, within 20 years, all that stuff was gone. So yeah, we were not perfect, but we brought it to an end. And thank you
This
very
is
much.
revisionist history.
Thank you so very much.